And good afternoon, everybody. This is George Weitengruber Law, doing your community chat series with you. And already I can guarantee that I was screwing it up, and I'm just gonna fucking do it over again because it's not live. Look at that. Isn't that refreshing? And good evening, everybody. George Weitengruber from Weitengruber Law, bringing you another episode of the Community Chat series. We are thanking you all for staying with us all this time. We're officially calling this season 2, 30 episodes down, still learning what we're doing, but having a lot of fun doing it. And today I'm super excited to bring you Jodi Grinwald, who is a business coach and also is the founder and chair for the ZZAK Applaud Our Kids Foundation. Jodi, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on. I so appreciate it.
I am really excited to talk to you because during all of this chaos and craziness during the pandemic, the pivot that many people have to do in their lives means that coaches are such an important person to talk to about those fundamental life shifts. And because of the nature of social distancing and the difficulty in being able to gather as a group, nonprofits have been hit especially hard. So being able to shine a light on both of those things, I think, is such a valuable thing for the community. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am a certified professional coach. I actually have a dual certification. I'm also an energy leadership index master practitioner. Sounds like a really long name there. And I'm also the co-founder and CEO of the ZZAK Applaud Our Kids Foundation. That co-founded the organization 3 years ago in honor of my dad, Zach, our dad, Zach, who passed away from ALS over 5 years ago.
How did you find yourself in the nonprofit sector in general before this particular nonprofit? And then we'll come back and we'll talk about what you're doing now.
Absolutely. So actually, nonprofit found me, which is kind of funny. I had worked in the for-profit industry in New York City for a long time in the fashion industry, and pivoted from there to working for a nationwide demolition contractor. So really way different. And after really not loving that industry for myself that much, I went looking for a position and posted my way back, I'm going to age myself, way back on the Monster days, when Monster.com, and the American Heart Association found me. And they called me in for an interview. 3 interviews in, they hired me as the regional director for one of the Heart Walks in New Jersey. And within about 1.5 years, I was promoted to senior regional director and worked my way up there to executive director. And then shifted from there and moved over to another body part, the American Lung Association, and was vice president of development over 5 states and about a staff of 17 working there.
Nobody really gets into the lung or spleen industry after that. So going from American Heart to American Lung, that had to be a great foundational building block for working with nonprofits. What did you?
It was, well, working for the Heart Association, I said it was like boot camp, because first of all, you get the best training, that's for sure. And I really learned a lot about the basics of nonprofits and working with boards and building momentum and building and stewarding not only donors and sponsors, but just creating friendships. I call it friend raising. And that's exactly, I mean, I still talk to so many of those people back from 2005. We became friends over the years and did great work together. And I loved managing teams. That was so much fun. And it really taught me, actually, I didn't know at the time, it was teaching me really to get ready to launch into being a co-founder of a nonprofit. I never in a million years thought that was going to be my path.
I've never heard the word friend raising before, but I think it's such a wonderful phrase. Mm-hmm. When we find ourselves involved with nonprofits in general, it's usually because we've had a personal effect from it. We've been touched by it. So the concept of friend raising in a community is such a cool idea.
Absolutely. And it is true, because I think that when I always felt this way. My motto was, if you lead with the mission, the money will follow. And in nonprofits, because the goals are so high in so many cases, when you sit there and you're so afraid of not reaching your goal, it becomes really important to stop worrying about that and start worrying about fundraising and creating relationships, because ultimately that will lead you to where you need to be. I totally believe in that. And you have to believe in that in order to reach that goal or even to exceed it.
And I guess it goes back to the core foundation of nonprofits in general. Obviously, fundraising is a significant part, but the awareness and that kind of branding, especially when you're dealing with the nationals that you were involved with, is such a key part, almost more than the money to some degree.
It's so true. You see, the thing about that was, and I learned that quickly, was that when you come into you go into even a networking event and you say, "Hey, I'm the vice president of development for XYZ national company," they like shake their head. They respond. They probably have heard of it. When you say, "Hey, I'm the CEO and co-founder of the ZZAK Applaud Kids Foundation," they're like, "Oh, why did you, what is that about? Oh, it's in reference to my dad. Oh, that's cute. That's sweet." And
So
so,
cute.
I'm sorry.
It's so cute. It's so sweet. It's a cute little pet in the room that we pat on the head and then dismiss to get to the next person. But
Yeah.
but that's a bunch of bullshit. And
Yes.
we're going to talk about that now, because when I found out what your nonprofit does, I was really, really excited by it. And so the first place that we have to start with it's the ZZAK Applaud Our Kids charity. And I want you to explain why it's named that.
Sure. So Zach G was my dad when my sister and I, unfortunately, over 6 years ago, found out that my dad was diagnosed with ALS, which is an awful, horrible disease and not even something that we would have ever thought about. 6 months after his diagnosis, he had passed away. And before he had passed away, and it was a horrible, torturous 6 months, he talked about that his biggest regret in his whole life was the fact that when he was a kid, he could not afford to take ongoing lessons in singing. And found out he was an operatic tenor when he was in his mid-30s, when he took his very first lesson. So imagine you go for your first lesson and you find out you have all this potential. Now you have a family. You couldn't afford your lessons back then when you were a kid. Now you're an adult and you're like, I'm working, I'm making money, but I've got to take care of my family. So he took lessons on and off. And he wasn't able to really engross himself the way he wanted to. And so that was his regret on his deathbed, was that he couldn't connect to the performing arts, and it helped him to feel good about himself. He loved bringing the audience in. And so a year and a half after he passed away, we had a conversation about how can we make it so that there are not other kids who grow up to have that huge regret. And that's the preface of why we started.
It's one of those things that ALS is such a devastating, debilitating disease, because it starts taking away your body and robbing your physical ability before it gets into your mental capacity, and people just lose that shell. So it can be insanely devastating. And your background already being with nonprofits while he was suffering through this obviously gave you a launching point to where you are now. So why don't you tell us what the premise and the goals of the ZZAK Applaud Our Kids charity is about?
Sure, absolutely. So we wanted to make sure, like I said, that there were, no other children would have those kinds of regrets. So we wanted to create an organization where we could fund children who have just a need and want to take lessons in dance, acting, instrumental music, and vocal instruction. But we didn't want to do a one and done, right? So if you go into, an area where a population is underserved and you just provide them with a one and done, you're now taking away. They love it, and then you take it away. It's gone next day or next week. And even if it's 4 sessions, they're losing something again. And that was not what we wanted. Knowing in that, in those areas that are underserved, there are organizations that they come in and they do great things, but then they're gone. So we said, okay, we have to make sure that this could be ongoing positive impact. It could help with social and emotional learning. And that's exactly what we created. So when we fund a child, we can fund a child to take these lessons for the entire school year and up to 11 years, because that's what we have decided to do. They have to be between the ages of 7 to 18, 18 still being in high school. And we will fund them to go to studios close to their home. So where we are very unique is not only the length of time that we provide the funding, but also the way the program runs. So the program is such that if you live in Tom's River, and I'm just pulling that name up for a minute. If there's a dance, if you want to be a dancer in Tom's River and you're between those ages, that 7 to 18, and you meet the financial needs requirements, we will find a studio, dance studio close to your home. We will do a background check. We will do an interview. We will actually do a tour of the facility. And we want to make sure that those who are teaching these children are all about being all inclusive. You can't take a 13-year-old girl who's never taken a dance lesson before and put them into a dance class with other kids who've been dancing since they're 3 and let them feel comfortable. The teacher has to bring them into that fold. And so the teachers have to meet those requirements. We pay the studios monthly, so that the parent doesn't have to worry about anything. And if they need shoes or dancewear or an instrument, we provide that as well. We look for donations, or we purchase it if we have to. George, I think the interesting part about the organization is kind of the way we started, right? Because the idea sounded great, but then to get it started was the hard part.
Right.
And so, we're talking in my sister's backyard about how we wanted to get this going. And we found out that the bank told us we had to have $100 to open up the bank account, the business bank account. And so sitting in my backyard, I said to my sister, okay, so you're gonna give $50, I'm gonna give $50, and we'll get this started. We'll do crowd rising and all of that. And she said, no, she goes, I have a better idea. There's $100 that Dad had left in his wallet, and we had put his wallet away in a dresser drawer and not to look at it for a year and a half. And she's like, I know that he left that $100 bill in there, and we were never going to touch it. Leave the wallet the way he left it. So basically, it's amazing to always be able to share that he started the bank account. He was a part of it from the beginning.
I want to go back and talk about your dad for a minute, because you had given me a pretty emotional story about how he used his voice, used his ability to write in order to process heavily emotional situation. Why don't you go back into the days where your dad started using his gift?
Sure, absolutely. So he was singing other people's music all the time, whether he was rehearsing or going to lessons when he could. But the time that kind of really changed his life was he worked in Manhattan. It was probably about 12 years ago, 15 years ago. And he worked in Manhattan. He was going to get a Starbucks coffee. And as he was passing by, it was really cold. And he was passing by an alcove of a storefront where a homeless man spent his evening, and unfortunately, the homeless man had passed away in that alcove overnight from frostbite. And it's even hard to tell the story. And as he was passing by, they were taking away this man's body. And my father calls me, and he called my sister separately, crying on the phone saying, how could this happen? How could this man die alone? Like, how is this possible? And he had to leave. He had to leave New York, get on the boat and come back home and take a nap because he was just so distraught as to what he just saw. He was a very compassionate and empathetic man. And so he woke up in the middle of his dream that with all these words that came to him, and he didn't know what to do with them. So he wrote them down and he brought them to his vocal teacher that he had at the time. And she said, this is not a poem. This is a song. You need to make this into a song. So he worked with a producer who donated pretty much most of his time to work on this because of the story. And my father said every time he sung it in honor of the man who passed away, so that even though he died alone, he was always remembered. And so the song is on YouTube. It's called Homeless by ZZAK, ZZAK, because my father was an artist and had to be different. And it has, I think, about 11,000 views, but it really is a dedication to a man that he never met.
And it's such an important thing, because a song dedicated to a man that he never met, now a foundation dedicated to his life, helping children that he also never met. Every kid that now is part of your group gets to carry on your father's story. That's pretty cool. I'm going to make you cry now. So
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh my gosh, I never really thought of it like that. Yes, that is true because it's interesting. Every time a new child comes into this, comes into our fold, right? We call ourselves the AOK family, right? So they get a ZAK G, Applaud Kids T-shirt, and so his name ZAK G is on every T-shirt with the Applaud Kids logo. So yes, his name is now throughout our area and community, and he is being remembered that way. And we do share his videos with them so that they know, the man behind the funding.
So that's so fun. And I'm so sorry to have knocked you a little bit, but it's such
No,
a
it's great.
poignant piece. There are 3 tenets to what you as a nonprofit are trying to do. And why don't you explain that to people?
Absolutely. So the one is what we call the creativity piece. So creativity is the scholarships. We're providing the opportunity for kids to be able to be creative. And then we have kindness is our next pillar. And our kindness pillar is all about kids that can't afford to take their own lessons, right? They have so much that they can give back to. And it's so important my kids had to learn early on about community service because those poor kids were coming to my heart walks and my lung walks when they were 5 and 6 years old at 3 a.m. So we really, and because of that, they are very community focused. So we wanted to work with kids who could afford to take their own lessons and have them give back by, if they're talented and they want to audition, they can audition for what we call the AOK Performance Group, stands for Applaud Our Kids. And we take them out to perform at different nonprofit and for-profit events. We do not charge those who we perform for. And we're doing that to really showcase the performing arts in our communities, bringing entertainment to different events. They've sung with, they've actually met John Bon Jovi. They've sung at Feinstein's 54 in New York City. They've performed at Investors Bank events and on we go. But the one thing that they do that I love is they also perform at our events and they help to raise money for their peers. And they get to meet the scholarship recipients and see that there's really no difference at all between the two different, whether you can afford or can't afford doesn't mean anything. It's all about humanity and kindness. And so the importance there is we showcase, hey, you're performing, but you're performing for Jane over here who really wants to do what you can do. And they formed the most amazing friendships. At the end of the school year in May, we have a scholarship showcase where all the kids we fund come out and perform for our donors and the community so that they can see where their donor dollars go. I felt like that was really important coming from national organizations because you can't always follow the dollar because they're so big. Here, I wanted people to be able to see where their money was going. And they spend the day with the AOK Performance Group and they perform together at the end in the finale. And they learn the song that morning. So it's really so cool to watch that all come together in the choreography. And then George, the last pillar is connection. So what we do is we fund teachers to go into what is it called? I'm sorry, to go into existing organizations like the Boys and Girls Club, the Hope Sheds Light, different organizations where we fund the teacher. They go in to these places so that the kids that cannot, don't have any transportation are able to still get immersed into what we do. And so, and we can then provide them with lessons that they would never be able to take. And I have to say, George, I don't think we ever thought that the impact we were going to have by providing funding for ongoing performing arts lessons would be what it has turned out to be.
There's so many things to unpack with what you just said, which is awesome and wonderful. But I'm going to start with the easy one. Why should people care? Why is performing arts important, not just to you, but to all of us?
That is such a fabulous question, by the way, because I think that's one of the things when I just started about, that's cute and that's nice. Yeah. That it goes back to that because we're not a frontline organization. During a pandemic, we're not feeding people. We're feeding their minds, but we're not feeding them, or housing them. So why is it important? It's important because the kid who found her father at 7 years old, who passed away of a heroin overdose at the day of our scholarship showcase, thought that she lost everything. And we heard from her grandmother 2 days after this man passed, her dad, who was supposed to be at our event, saying, please don't take away my dance lessons. That's all I have left. There was no jeopardy that she was going to lose her dance lessons. But in a 7-year-old's mind, after losing her father, that is what came to her. To the boy who lost his mother last year to an opioid overdose, who doesn't want to leave his bed and will only go out of his bed for the guitar lesson that we're funding right now, and then goes back into his room after the guitar lessons because the only way his grandmother could get him to leave was to connect him with those lessons. That's the thing that most people don't understand. For the creatives in the world, if they don't have that, things can happen and can be very detrimental.
And also to that point, we've been dealing with a long-standing silent war where schools have been cutting the budget for the arts. They've been cutting music programs. They've been cutting the extracurriculars. And unfortunately, if there isn't an organization like you to step in, kids aren't touched by those things. How important is that for kids to have that balance?
It is extremely important. And it's funny because the schools are starting to call us because they're hoping that maybe we would fund a full-time staff person because their budgets don't cover it. And we don't do that. It's only after school. It's not to fund a teacher in the school system. But that's the problem is that, you have, if you think of sports, right? So certain people, they need, certain kids need to kind of let off that steam by running or taking track or being in football. And people relate to that. They understand that, right? And there's national football leagues and all of that, but they don't look at the arts in the exact same way. And unless you have that creative mind, some people will think, well, that's just an extra. But the problem is for those who do have a creative mind, it is all they have and all they want, and it's their release. Painters paint, athletes, do whatever they need to do in sports, and creatives need to create. And I think that that's unfortunately lost to funding in schools. Like you said, that's the first thing to go, and I just don't understand.
So growing up, I did my little share of acting, my amateur acting. At 6, I got to be Winnie the Pooh singing Coddleston Pie. And it was kindergartners and 6th graders that were meshed into a play together. In 6th grade, I was the Cowardly Lion. And in 17, I took my mock trial team and I turned it into a performance piece, stealing every little bit of A Few Good Men, From the Hip, and a couple of other law movies, and figuring out how to bring drama to, the practice of law as a high schooler. What I like to tell people is my parents will always say, I was born with a very sharp brain, very big brain, but low motivation. So it's a bad combination. It took me years to mature and get past that. But as I sat there in 6th grade, determined to become the Cowardly Lion, I wrote my lines a million times and practiced my lines a million times. And I taught myself focus in order to do something that I was passionate about. And I think what gets overlooked in the arts is the practice and determination. It's the same as football and baseball. It is a mental skill and a practice skill that doesn't involve physical coordination to the degree of football or baseball, but still does, because it's carrying yourself and the confidence and all of those things that have to go into it that we're cutting the funding for.
Exactly. We have a kid in that is on the spectrum, couldn't make eye contact with us. Like, we do an interview and the kids come through and want to and have, they give us the application, they meet all the criteria, and then we meet them. No eye contact. They're taking lessons now for 2 siblings, taking lessons now for 3 years. They've been with us all 3 years. And now they run to us and there's total eye contact. And exactly what you're saying, and that's such a valid point, is that we're not saying that the next, the people that are the kids that are part of what we're doing, they're going to be the next American Idol. We're not even looking for that. We don't care. It's all about self-esteem, teamwork, learning, the skills, memorization skill. You learn so much by being in the arts. It parlays into so many different industries that they could wind up in.
And it's so much about that confidence too. I feel, and maybe unfairly, I feel that we've created hold on a second. Mm-hmm. We've created a generation of people that, right, we're sitting there, we're on our phones, that's it. We're looking into this. Kids come out of elementary school and sometimes high school, and they haven't learned to interface. They can't connect.
Right.
And arts forces connection.
So does with that, and no matter what it is, because you're from your facial expressions, you have to connect with the audience. There's just so many. When you're playing an instrument, you have to connect. You want people to understand what you're performing. In the sound that you put out from that instrument. There's so many different things that the arts brings. Confidence, like you said, I think is the first and most important one.
I'm going to give you the other most important one because you told it to me earlier, and that was a child involved with the arts is more likely to finish college than those that aren't exposed.
Yes, it is. There is a statistic in Arts Ed Now, New Jersey. They're doing great things in the state, and they have done the research, and it is clear. A child that is in an arts education, is studying arts education for 4 years, has a better percentage rate of going to college and completing college than someone that doesn't. And so that's it. SAT wise, if they are in a class, it'll raise them up 100 points. So if they're in a class, if they're taking lessons for 4 years, it'll add 100 points to their SATs. I mean, that's just an amazing thing to be able to read. And they're doing the research, and it's a really great, Arts Ed Now, New Jersey has a great website to really understand what the arts does. They do all the technical background checks on what are the stats. And taking a look at that, it boggled my mind, right? Because we came into this doing this from our heart, not from statistics. Then, looking at the statistics, you're like totally blown away as to, why this is even more important. And as I said from the beginning, we never knew what the impact was going to be. It blew our minds.
That's so cool. How many kids are in your program right now, active?
Over 50.
And now we get to the crazy thing. We're dealing with COVID. We're dealing with kids that got yanked from school, and now we can't really come together. And our new hybrid program for the schools involves core in the morning. So math, science, language, and the rest of it is at home study for the afternoon, which goes towards back to the arts. And that performance piece is now been shifted to home, and good luck. Maybe you're getting around to it. How have you kept your group engaged over the last 7 months?
So we pivoted really early. I have to say, I think it was the second week of things being closed that we pivoted across the board. So the kids that were in classes and scholarship recipients, a lot of their teachers went virtual. So that was great. But there were some that didn't. And so we were like hurrying up to figure out what we were going to do for those kids, because the connection was going to be really important. We couldn't lose that. The isolation in itself, detrimental to what was going on emotionally and mentally for the kids. So we talked to teachers, and we were able to get a teacher that donated 2 classes to our foundation. And we could not only invite the scholarship recipients, but we were able to invite any child anywhere, because as long as the scholarship recipients were a part of it, why couldn't the other children log on too? It wasn't going to cost any extra. So we wanted to make sure to keep kids together. So we had an acting class. We had a hip hop dance party class that parents could join, which was a lot of fun. And then we had a Broadway style dance class, and that went on for a long time until we were able to, start lessons again. And if we have to go back to that, we will. And that also now adds into, like I said before, if you don't have transportation and you're not part of a civic group like the Boys and Girls Club, we can also do Zoom classes with teachers and hire teachers to do those Zoom classes, pandemic or not. So that's how we pivoted. Of course, everybody's been using Zoom, but then we also did something else that was unique. We started an open mic night every other Thursday. And we had kids, not just from New Jersey, not just from New York. We had kids from Tennessee and California, and if anybody shared it and it went out, we would have kids perform and adults perform too. We allowed anybody, it was free, come on and feel connected. We had it via Zoom. So there were, everybody had to take themselves off of mute in order to clap for the person. People started to become friends and talk to each other. So between the classes and the virtual open mic nights, and for our AOK performance group members, we had virtual ice cream nights, virtual movie nights, and we just kept the conversation going because we didn't we were worried, and we still are, and we make sure and we check in. and we're starting to do some things outside right now, but numbers are going up. So we're ready if we have to switch.
Right. And unfortunately, I mean, that is the weird big unknown of this model only works as long as everybody's flexible and ready to pivot. And I'm glad that you're well positioned for that. What do you think where does it go from here? Not COVID. Where does your program go from here? What's your big dream? What's the audacious future look like?
The audacious future is all of New Jersey, you know, because we started in Ocean, we've moved to Monmouth, we have kids, now we have a kid in Patterson, we have a kid in Mercer County, like it's starting to grow. I want us to go into New York City. You know, our big goal is across the country. You know, our big goal is to connect as many kids as possible. That's not our 5-year goal. That's a little bit further out than that, obviously. But we just want to help kids connect, you know, and give them and make more. My father said, literally, again, when he was dying, he said, we said, how are we going to know that you're going to be here watching over us? And he said, you'll see me in all of the smiles. And we said, my sister and I, we left his hospital room that night and we were like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Now, it was like a moment where we started taking pictures of the kids when they would get their new shirts. And at one moment I had an epiphany. That's what he meant. And it was like he knew before we did. It was just so interesting.
You've magically figured out how to connect a legacy with your dad, and you've taught a whole new generation how to be passionate about things and how to give back to their community in a magical, amazing way. That's so cool.
Thank you. I appreciate that, George. And opportunities like this to share the mission and to share what we're doing is so important to us.
I think it's important to all of us. And I think having any background in the arts for the purpose of balancing and focusing and just having the bravery to put yourself out there and be vulnerable and be unafraid or afraid, but still willing to brave going forward to an audience of strangers is such a magical talent. And I'm so psyched that you get to foster that.
Thank you. I really do appreciate that. Yes. And we're not just cute and sweet.
I assure you, your performers are cute and sweet, but your charity is a force to be reckoned with in terms of what it's trying to do to develop the next generation of not just artists, but of leaders that take that skill that you taught them and generate the confidence to do more than they can expect from themselves when they're just young and don't have that.
Absolutely. And so many of them don't really have the support around them, you know what I mean, that they need. And they look to those lessons as their extended family, the teachers and those people in their classes. They become a lot more than just people that they know from, you know, standing next to them on the dance line. So it creates a whole different world for them.
Creates a family. You know, I want to make sure that we don't miss this because it's coming up and I want people to know about it and get excited about it. You've got a event coming up in a few weeks, right?
I do. October 22nd.
Tell me about that.
Super excited. It's our 3rd year. It's called the Step into the Spotlight Soiree and Talent Competition. We look for adults across the state, or now we are bi-coastal. So we are across the country, adults that audition. And because everything we do is for the kids, but in this case, we're like, let the adults who have talent and want to share, help us fundraise for the kids to show the kids, hey, you could be doing this your whole life. It doesn't matter, you get older, and even if it's not your career, you still should be connected to it. So the adults perform and they go in front of celebrity judges. And our judges range from someone who's on Days of Our Lives to, we have 2 youth judges. One has been in Kinky Boots on Broadway and on Single Parent on ABC. One is in Raising Dion with John Ritter's son, Jason Ritter, and that's on Netflix. We have Diane Raver, who is the Garden State Film Festival's co-founder. So there's a list of wonderful celebrity judges that you can find them all the information on our website at applauderkids.org. We're going to entertain and inspire that night. And you'll get to see some of the kids perform from the AOK Performance Group, and the adults from across the country perform. And we have a VIP time where you can actually ask the celebrity judges and contestants some questions. So it's going to be a real fun night, virtual.
Do they have to pre-register? Do they have to log in? How do they find the event?
So if you go to our website, you'll find everything, applaudourkids.org. The tickets start at $40. And I think this is important that I share, is that it costs us $60 a month to be able to send a child for dance lessons. It costs us $120 a month for acting, instrumental, and vocal lessons, because those are one-on-one. Dance is a dance class. So it's obviously half the price. But tickets start at $40, and that's just the main show. Or you can be a part of the VIP and pay $60, and that means you put a child in a dance class for a month. Or you can pay $120 and sponsor a child for a month of vocal lessons. So it's and you'll be part of the VIP. So it's part of pick the entrance fee you want to pay and how much you want to support the organization. But it's $40 for a ticket for the main part of the event.
How many dollars will you pay me to perform? Fear not, people. You can pay me more not to perform.
And listen, you could audition for the next show. I'm starting to get people now.
Audition. It would be amazingly devastating and hilarious, because the only thing I could come out and sing is King of the Forest. I'd have to go right into it. And sure enough, those lines are still in my head 40 years later. Don't you doubt it.
Because you wrote them over and over again.
And over and over again. Jodi, I love everything that you're doing. I love your heart that's in this, and I love your father for conveying that to you and giving you this amazing gift to give back to the community and to express it with the arts. Is there anything else you'd like to tell us?
Just that, take a look at who we are and what we do. Support the arts as much as you can, because people are really missing it right now. That's the one thing I will say. We need to stay connected to that. We need to help reopen things as soon as it's healthy to do so. And I think it's important to know that even if you give any organization $10 right now, any nonprofit, they all need us to come together. So the government cannot do what if all these nonprofits go away, the government cannot pick up the pieces of that. There's just not enough funding. So we need to keep our nonprofits funded. And I just want to thank you, because you're doing a wonderful community service to everybody who watches, because they get to learn about the different people and organizations that represent the community. So thank you for creating something.
I'm so happy to take in my COVID mania and turn it into something productive for the world. How can they find you? I'd say it one more time. It's
applaudourkids.org. And it's Jodi at applaudourkids.org. So that's my email, and it's Jodi. So either way is fine. And we're on Facebook. We're on Instagram under the exact same name, Applaud Our Kids. And please find us, please like us, and follow us.
We're going to put all those links in the comments below. Please connect onto those. We'll also put a link to the event out there. So pretty please look into it. Find yourself a glorious diversion. What I love about this pandemic, and a brief silver lining, has been the artist community on a national level has been so amazing with the content that they've put out to help keep us sane. And just remember, every one of those artists at one point was a little kid looking for their outlet, and Jodi's fostering that for the next generation. Jodi Grinwald, thank you so much for joining us and telling us a lot more about ZZAK, Applaud Our Kids. It was so great to have you today.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
I look forward to seeing you in a couple of weeks.
Sounds good.
Have a great day.
You too.